This is breaking news.
Michael Johnson. The athletes are amazing, but they need a platform. As the inaugural staging of Grand Slam track approaches, Michael Johnson talks about why he thinks it can bring about the kind of change that athletics needs to be able to grow. The National Stadium in Kingston holds some significant memories for Michael Johnson. It was during his time at Baylor College that the man who would go on to become a multiple Olympic and world champion sprinter got his first taste of Jamaica. Traveling to race at the renowned venue was, in fact, the first time he'd ever left America. I ran down there twice in college in relay events, in 1989 and 1990, he recalls. It was eye-opening. I'd never seen that level of young talent. It's the famous ISSA/Grace Kennedy Boys and Girls Championships, or CHAMPS, that packs this particular arena to the rafters on an annual basis. But just 5 days after this year's edition takes place, Johnson's latest vision for the sport will start to become a reality on the very same track that will have played host to the Caribbean's rising stars. There will be some rather more established names on show for the first of the 4 meetings. Others will follow in Miami, Philadelphia, and then LA, that form the inaugural staging of Grand Slam track. The project being driven by the former 200 meters and 400 meters world record holder, which is promising to bring change to the sport. In case you haven't been following the story, Grand Slam track is planning to do things a bit differently. Here's the concept. A total of 48 athletes or racers have already been signed up and are contracted to compete in one of 6 event groups in each of the fall slams. At each slam, every racer will have to take part in 2 different disciplines. For example, U.S. star Sydney McColburn-Levrone will race over the 400 meters hurdles and the 400 meters flat, while her fellow American Cole Hocker will take on not just his more familiar 1,500 meters distance, but also the 800 meters. On top of that, those 48 racers will come up against 48 challengers, whose identities will be different from slam to slam, with the first prize for coming out on top being $100,000. It's all designed to create a professional and more lucrative league that sits at the top of the sport, places the focus on rivalries rather than times, and draws more attention. The biggest challenge, according to Johnson, was always going to be getting athletes to commit to competing against their primary rivals 4 times. With those 48 races secured, including Olympic and world champions, 36 of them won medals in Paris last summer. That box has been very much ticked. After all the planning, now execution mode has been engaged as the spring approaches. It hasn't all been plain sailing to reach this point, mind you. You're giving the athletes what they've always wanted, but you're also asking them to change, and so you expect that that's going to be a little bit challenging for people, says Johnson. You're going to always have some resistance, but, by and large, the athletes are down with it. It would not have been difficult at all for me, he adds. I'd wanted this. I always understood how other professional sports work because, when I was competing as a sprinter, my best friends were NFL players, and I saw how their sport worked versus my sport. I've always been a big Formula One fan, and I saw how that sport worked versus our sport. I would have understood the trade-off. And then I loved competing in the big championships. If you gave me an opportunity to compete against the best, that's what I wanted to do. All of my records came when they were high stakes, and I ran my best when I was competing against the best, so that's what I wanted. For most of these athletes, I think that's what they want as well. That's one of the things they cite. I want the races to mean something. I want to compete against my rivals, and that's what's going to bring out the best in me. Much has been written and spoken about Grand Slam track before a single step has even been run, and it could be argued that it's already making an impact. Has it been a coincidence, for example, that the Diamond League prize pot for the year ahead has recently increased? Those sums still pale in comparison to the earning power of some other sports, though, so how does Johnson see athletics being able to keep up when the choice is available to the watching? and participating public continue to grow. At the grassroots level, certainly here in the US, there are significant participation numbers, he says. It's the #1 participation sport for girls in the US, and I think it's #2 for boys behind American football, so that's definitely a